We've got to change our strategy away from government bonds toward gold and Bitcoin. The business model at JP Morgan seems to be it's okay if you catch us stealing money as long as we can keep 75 cents of every dollar we steal.
Please join us for our next live stream Sunday, October 18th at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll go over current events, past guests, and of course, gold and silver news. Once again, our next live stream will be Sunday, October 18th, 9 p.m. Eastern. See you then. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira. As always, if you are new to our channel or you have not already done so, please do subscribe, hit the bell to be notified on new updates, and give us a thumbs up if you like what we do. We truly do appreciate your support. Max Keiser joins us today, host of the popular show, The Keiser Report. Max is passionate about exposing the market frauds of our times and has labeled JP Morgan Chase the biggest financial terrorist on Wall Street. He believes gold, silver, and Bitcoin are sound money for the people. It's time to saddle up and silver up for Max Keiser. Max, welcome to SBTV. How are you doing?
Oh, great. Thanks for having me on.
We're glad you could make it. Hopefully we will get through this and we can get you back into bed and rest up. I know you got a little bit of a cold there, but thanks again for being here.
Yeah, I got hit by little allergies, but I think it's the ragweed season, but should be okay.
Max, for those who don't know, you have a podcast called Orange Pill hosted by Stacy and yourself. Now, we've heard of the red pill, we've heard of the blue pill, but for those that don't know, what's the orange pill?
Right. Well, the red pill, people know about it. You're seeing the truth behind all the fake facade and seeing the reality of the situation. And many people have seen the reality of that situation, and they've been red pilled. So the question is, what comes after the red pill? And we call it the orange pill. And the orange pill is really what Bitcoin has to offer. And Bitcoin is a path out. It's a solution. It's a way to escape the red pill problems and the blue pill problems. And by embracing everything that is Bitcoin, which includes a lot of philosophical elements to it, spiritual elements as well. And the podcast is doing great. We're getting thousands of people in the Telegram group. They're just a splinter group now of Spanish speakers because Keiser Report has a huge Spanish-speaking audience. And we've got our Keiser Report dubbed into Spanish. We did a show last week. It got over 1.2 million views, so it's just like very popular. And it's a global movement. Bitcoin is a global store of value, and it has a global audience.
Max, I want to read you something that came out from Reuters referring to central bank digital currencies. Quote, their main fear is losing control of the payment system if private currencies such as Bitcoin or Facebook's proposed Libra are widely adopted, end quote. So my question is, what will things look like if they lost control of the payment system, and is that possible?
Right. Yeah, I saw that quote. It's very interesting because at least they are now aware of the fact that they are losing control. And in fact, they are losing control, and in large part because of Bitcoin. And their solutions in terms of coming up with their own digital currency alternatives won't work because by the nature of those projects, that'll be centralized. So it really won't be much different than the current fiat system. The fiat system is already digital in many ways. So they're just going to recreate the current system, and it won't be effective in combating the rise of Bitcoin and the obliteration of central banks due to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a first-time event in the history of humans, really, going back hundreds of thousands of years. We've never actually had the existence of something that you could call absolutely scarce, that you can use as hard money. And so this means that central banks are not really needed anymore. And that would have been the case even without all the problems that central banks have been involved with by overplaying their mandate. Central banks, instead of being a lender of last resort, they become activists, and they've decided that they become political, and they've decided that they should try to manage the economy from their central authority, and never works ever. And so they kind of destroyed themselves in a lot of ways by taking on the world's problems with their only solution that they have, and that is to print money. When I started on Wall Street in the early 1980s, we still had Paul Volcker and the legacy of Paul Volcker, and he understood that the central bank needed to raise rates when the party got too crazy, right? Take the punch bowl away. But since Alan Greenspan, now since 40 years or so, 50 years, they only have one trick. It's a one-trick pony. All they do is just print money, lower rates. That's all they ever do. And it causes malinvestment. It causes social income and wealth gaps. It causes social unrest. It feeds wars. It feeds violence. And now, now with Bitcoin, I think now we're at the end of the central bank era.
Yeah, it does feel like we're getting close. Max, there was a time in the past, like in the 70s, where one middle class job took care of everything. It took care of the mortgage, the rent, the car payment, took care of even college. But somehow we've arrived at a point in society where two middle class jobs simply still cannot cut it. What would you point to as the main culprit for this situation that many people are in today? Is it the money printing, the government combination, or is it something else?
Well, the currency is being debased through central banks. So if you go back to 1971, really is when the Nixon closed the gold window in the United States. And you can look at a chart and see quite clearly that wages in America started to deteriorate in terms of their purchasing power. And wage growth has really been anemic. It hasn't really been much of anything. And so if the wages aren't growing, but the money supply is, then quite it's not hard to figure out that you're going to need 2 jobs, 3 jobs. It's simple mathematics. It's not really a tough mathematical equation to figure out, right? So this is what Bitcoin can offer, and it's already happening in places like Nigeria and other countries Nigeria is becoming the epicenter of the global Bitcoin movement. They've already jumped ahead to becoming what's called hyper Bitcoinization. They use it day to day. 30% of the population is using Bitcoin every day, and it's a store of value, a medium of exchange, and it's already proving itself, and that's a very big country with a very big and bright future.
The current environment, it's making saving money a sure way to lose purchasing power, and the only way to beat real inflation seemingly is to chase yields in riskier assets, what we might call plunder.
How is that? Why do you say that?
Because of the low rates, you don't get anything by keeping it in a bank.
Yeah, that's true, but it's also true that the mandate by the idea that the propaganda that comes out of the central banks is don't save money, spend money, don't save, spend money, and they always talk about the savings glut. They talk about the paradox of thrift, right? So they really hate the idea of people saving money and becoming sovereign, individually sovereign, and independently wealthy. So first of all, I think it's good to understand that saving money is the key toward independence and freedom. You need to, and it's also the basis of capitalism, because you can't have capitalism without capital, and capital comes from savings. So the fact that the interest rates are down to zero, and people are chasing yield, that is a huge problem. But it doesn't obviate the need for people to save. What it does say is that gold and silver are now no longer penalized in the system because they don't pay a yield, because neither do government bonds. So, okay, government bonds don't pay a yield, and they're in a 300-year bubble. So that's obviously not a good vehicle for savings. Gold and silver are a good vehicles for saving. Bitcoin is an excellent vehicle for savings. But so let's make that clear that saving is still the key to individual sovereignty and freedom. It's just that yield instruments are no longer a viable way to do that. So that leaves us only with gold, silver, and Bitcoin. And that's why a country like MicroStrategy, headed up by Michael Saylor, they looked at their cash on their balance sheet. They had $500 million. They said, let's put 425 million of that into Bitcoin. They looked at every single other possibility: bonds, stocks, commodities, collectibles, Bitcoin, and they realized that Bitcoin was the single best way to save purchasing power, because they know that this 2% erosion every year through inflation means that they are guaranteed to lose, and they need to fight against that. And so they opted for what Paul Tudor Jones calls the fastest horse in the race, and that would be Bitcoin. So Paul Tudor Jones is into Bitcoin. Now we have Square under Jack Dorsey, just bought a lot of Bitcoin. And we've got Ray Dalio, biggest hedge fund manager in the world, just put 10% of his fund into gold. So clearly he's looking for a way to mitigate the risk of 0% interest rates and all the problems that are coming with that. So I just wanted to make that point, that savings is not bad. It's just that we've got to change our strategy away from government bonds toward gold and Bitcoin.
Okay, great point. Great point. So savings is good if you know the stores of value to actually put your savings in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the savings is the key to capitalism, and it's the key to economic, really freedom. And so that's fine. Savings is fine. It's just that the instrument of savings. I remember 20 years ago, my mom was getting 4.5%, 5% on her on her cash money market funds. And she just watched that rate go down to zero, and her monthly income got cut in half. And she just couldn't figure it out. Like, why is this? And she didn't know how to respond either. She was just didn't know what to do. And this is a crime, that this was essentially trillions of dollars was moved from saving accounts that were yielding 4 or 5% into the pockets of speculators and hedge fund operators and, crooks on Wall Street, with the help of the central bank, because there's no economic justification for it. They're not doing it. They haven't done the goal was, according to them, we're going to lower rates to spur to avoid we're going to fight deflation by lowering rates. That's what they've been saying to us. But we know now without any doubt that lowering rates actually causes deflation, doesn't fight deflation. And the proof is without doubt now. But they still tell us this, that they're fighting deflation by lowering rates, even though we now know that lowering rates actually causes deflation.
You mentioned some pretty big names there, Dalio, Buffett, Tudor Jones. Some of them went into gold, as you said, or mining. Some of them went into a Bitcoin. These people understand. They understand what Bitcoin does, what gold does. For the rest of us, from where I sit, I see gold and silver people not understanding Bitcoin. I see Bitcoin people not understanding gold and silver. And it's almost like a left-right divide. Do you see that as well? And if you do, why do you think that is?
Right, there is a divide, and on Keiser Report, we started in 2009, and our focus was largely on gold and silver. And then when we were introduced to Bitcoin in 2011, we realized that this was digital gold. So we started covering Bitcoin in a big way. And that, at the time, people scoffed at that idea. But now, almost 10 years later, people are now accepting of that idea. And I think that the reason that the gold bugs have difficulty understanding Bitcoin is that they don't understand how what backs Bitcoin. because they obviously are used to being able to pick up a gold bar and say, "Look, I'm holding this gold bar. I know it's gold. It's gold. And where is my Bitcoin? How do I hold on to it? Why is it secure? What backs it?" And so, and usually they don't really dig deeper into it from there. They kind of leave it there, and they don't explore the situation anymore. If they were to dig down into the situation, they would find that Bitcoin does everything gold does, but does it a little bit better. For example, gold, even with its relative scarcity, it's still inflating by about 2% a year. Bitcoin has an absolute scarcity of 21 million coins that will never change. So that has no inflation whatsoever. So it's superior to gold in that way. With gold, it's physical and I can hold it and that's great, but I need a third party to verify it. If somebody's not actually verifying that gold, I can't be really sure that it is gold. I mean, yeah, I can weigh it, I can do my own tests, I can go through all that, but that takes time and it's expensive. And storing gold is expensive. Verifying gold is expensive. Insuring gold is expensive. So now I'm paying 2% or maybe 3% a year for these services: transportation, storage, insurance. So I'm losing money on my gold. Now with Bitcoin, every transaction is the verification. So you don't need to spend any money on verifying your transaction because every 10 minutes, the entire network is audited and it doesn't keep going until that audit is finished and is completed. And so every single transaction is accounted for. So there is no need for verification. So there's no cost of a verification. There's no cost of insurance because I can run my own node at home and I can see every single transaction going back to 2009. And there's no need for transportation cost either. So the cost of owning this absolutely scarce digital commodity is essentially zero. The cost of using it in transactions is basically zero. Now, now this brings us more to the philosophical side of what is money, what is Bitcoin, and of course, opens up a lot of discussion. People say, "What is money?" And you have different schools of thought. You have Austrian school of thought and a monetarist school of thought, and different people have different ideas. What is money? I think I'm comfortable with the idea that money is whatever people decide it is. If people decide gold is money, then gold is money, and over thousands of years, its use as money has been really without it's grown into its role as money because it's scarce, it's divisible, it's portable, it's fungible, and it's you find it everywhere in the world, and then it's scarce at the same time, right? So it's of all the elements on the periodic table, gold has proven to be the best commodity to use as money. So with Bitcoin, it's money first of all because people use it as money, and people use it as a store of wealth. So that's the first thing it has going for it, is that in this new digital world that we live in the 21st century, people have decided that Bitcoin is money. So that's the first step toward something being used as money. So then you have to dig in and you say, well, is it scarce? It's absolutely scarce. The one point that's interesting is the idea of utility. And I know that the Mises regression theorem, when they talk about gold, they say, well, you go back in time and it has utility value. And that's one of the important aspects of gold, is that it had at one point a more of a utility value. But I think that's absolutely wrong. I think Mises regression theorem is completely wrong, and that so-called utility value interrupts and distracts from something being used as money. Look at the difference between gold and silver, for example. Part of the problem of silver is that it has too much utility value. You can use it in electronics and solar panels and things like that. So it would have a price based on its relative strength as a utility against other substitutes in an industrial application. Whereas if you use a Carl Menger model of value as 100% subjective, and utility has no place in that analysis, then you end up with a better appreciation of gold as money, and an even better and more perfect realization of Bitcoin as money, because it technically has no utility value whatsoever, which is one of its greatest strengths. And if you're looking at it as money, because then the community, the market is going to look at it purely in terms of its subjective value and what people use it for in money, and what I'm willing to trade for you today in exchange for Bitcoin today based on what the market is today. It's a pure market. It's one of the purest markets. The only markets you can find is, in nature, you find markets like photosynthesis, for example, is one of the purest markets you'll ever find on a green leaf. The exchange of carbon for oxygen is a perfect market, and it's done in a perfect ecosystem. Bitcoin operates photosynthetically and similarly in that it's just a perfect market that is around ubiquitously to actualize perfect exchange of value. Now we dig into one more piece of the puzzle, and we ask ourselves this question: what backs Bitcoin? Well, first of all, if the value is purely subjective, then you don't need to ask that question. It doesn't need to be backed by anything. But okay, let's ask that question anyway. And what we find is that Bitcoin is a technology that is extremely, it has a voracious and an insatiable appetite for energy, because, as I mentioned, the whole system is audited every 10 minutes. And this is you can view this in terms of the calculations per second that are required to maintain this auditing process, the hashing algorithm. And it's gobbling up 150 quintillion transactions a second is the rate at which this auditing is taking place. And that requires a lot of energy. So the Bitcoin protocol is using about just under 0.5% of the global energy in the world today. And that number is rising, and it's going to continue to rise, because that hash rate is going to continue to rise as because the protocol has an insatiable need for energy. It's programmed to eat energy, and there's nothing that anyone can do to stop that. It's kind of like the Godzilla sprung from the crust of the earth, and you can't stop it. And that's ultimately what's going on here, is that there's an entity on planet Earth called Bitcoin that's gobbling up all the world's energy. It's going to take all the energy from the fiat money world, because the fiat money world requires much more energy to keep it going than Bitcoin does, and it's not as efficient, so it's going to die, because Bitcoin's more efficient, and it's going to poach all of the energy from the fiat world, and that's how the security of the model goes up, and therefore the price goes up. So it gets harder over time. It's already harder than gold today, but it's going to get harder and harder as it gobbles up more and more of the global energy supply, and which means the security now just gets harder, and the price goes up, and then corporations are jumping in and saying, look, we got to get on this runaway freight train. So now MicroStrategy and Square are buying hundreds of millions and millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. Other corporations are going to start buying it up now. Then sovereign states will start buying it because they realize it's better than gold, and the fiat money is collapsing, in large part because fiat, in my opinion, Bitcoin is attacking the fiat money world like a white blood cell would be attacking a bacteria or a virus in your body. The Bitcoin looks at the world money supply. It sees fiat money as a disease, and it attacks it by starving it of energy. And so then finally you get into more of a cosmic discussion about why is this seemingly alien intruder attacking fiat money, right? And that's where the orange pill comes in. I mean, there's a whole cosmic spiritual dimension to this we have to start talking about, because all of our assumptions about the way economics works, the way money works, the way energy works, the way religion works, the way centralization works, the way polytheism and monotheism work, all these things are now have to be revisited and redefined and understood completely fresh with the introduction of this monster hard money virus that's doing battle against the fiat money crooks. Is that a long enough answer?
Oh, no, that's too short. No, just kidding. But Max, you made an interesting point where for guys, I mean, I'll just say that for guys that want to scoff and say, energy backs Bitcoin, I think we need to be balanced when we say that energy is also what backs gold and silver. You can't get those without energy. In fact, energy backs almost everything. So there is truth in that. Energy backs Bitcoin. But Max, in your view, what happens to Bitcoin? What happens to gold when these central bank digital currencies finally do come out and central banks say this is going to be the money and nothing else?
Right. So, well, first of all, I'm not necessarily saying that energy backs Bitcoin.
Okay.
With gold, we know that it's energy intensive, and you can make the case that gold is crystallizing or commodifying energy so that you can transport it into the future, right? I have a gold ounce, and it represents a lot of energy. It represents all the mining and labor that went into that gold ounce. And a year from now, or 10 years from now, or 100 years from now, I can use it. I can release that energy and make a purchase, right? So it moves energy forward in time. That's true. But you don't want to step over the line and start claiming that, you've got a labor theory of value, that value comes from labor, right? We're not saying that. We're just saying that gold and silver are the gold represents in a way an incredible amount of energy that goes into that you can transport into the future efficiently. Like, for example, I could that's why gold is a store of value and not, let's say, rice, right? Or a cooked rice. I could have a ton of cooked rice. It took a lot of energy to make that rice, but 100 years from now, I probably couldn't use it as money. A McDonald's hamburger apparently does work as a store of value, and that if you put it in your closet for 30 years, it doesn't change at all. You can still use it. You could use it because it doesn't deteriorate in any way. Apparently, it's not organic in any sense of the word. But with Bitcoin, it's more efficient even than gold in storing energy. So I wouldn't say it's backed by energy. It takes energy to create it, and it stores the energy. And then, unlike gold, Bitcoin steals energy. It's like gold doesn't mine itself, but Bitcoin does mine itself. Bitcoin doesn't need people to keep going. It can go without humans. And I often say that the price of Bitcoin could go to 100,000 or more, but humans may become extinct before that happens because it doesn't really need us. It can still steal energy. So then, to get to your question about the state, I think that the game theory that we've seen play out in the mining space and now in the corporate space will happen also in the political space. So now we've got a lot of people inside these governments who are pro-Bitcoin. So in order to do battle with Bitcoin, they have to form a coalition and be consistent in what is falling apart, because nobody in those governments wanted. First of all, they're all being paid in fiat money, and that fiat money is turning into garbage. So more and more of them are going to be gravitating to Bitcoin. Number two, Bitcoin itself has many billionaires now who have the wherewithal to lobby these governments to change the laws in their favor, which is always the history of governments. They always, to get elected, it costs money, and that money comes from your benefactors who ask for you for favors. That's the way politics works. And the people with the money who are funding these politicians are Bitcoiners, and so they will have the laws changed to the way that they want them changed. I think the nation state is dissolving. I think the political model, just like these other models, is dissolving. So I don't see that. I think they're fighting a rear guard action. They're coming to a gunfight with a knife, right? They don't know what they're fighting. They're under fought. You know, remember World War I? It started on horseback and it ended with airplanes. And this battle is the central banks are arriving on their horses to fight nuclear weapons, right? They're not going to win this battle.
So, Max, besides Bitcoin and gold, what's on your radar as far as investments go?
I like high growth software stocks. They're really doing great because everything's moving into the cloud now, and with COVID-19, everyone is the model for work has changed, and so people are doing like Zoom calls. So Zoom has been a big winner. People are not going into meetings anymore. They're doing virtual documentation. So a company like DocuSign is doing well. You've got the companies like the Latin American version of Amazon is catching up to Amazon. The symbol is MELI. It's over the counter stock. And those types of companies are doing great. Their stocks are doing very well. They're high growth, and I think that there's a whole group of these now that are going to be taking leadership positions because the big high tech, high cap names like Google, Amazon, Microsoft are they're in the multi-trillion-dollar valuations, and so they're still growing enterprises. But obviously, to grow an Apple from $2 trillion to $10 trillion is going to be, I think, a lot more difficult than some of these companies that are still valuations are in the 100 to 200 million, $300 million range. They're going to have the ability to, do 5 or 10x on their valuations with very, very compelling, very strong models.
Max, do you think we're going to ever see that velocity of money kicking in?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So we have things like deglobalization, the de-Chinification, de-dollarization, and the world is fracturing and splitting apart. Everything's becoming more localized. And so the velocity of money is going to be more localized. So you'll see communities spring up that will start to thrive, but on a more local basis. The global velocity of money, especially with the dollar now becoming de-dollarization being a big theme, it's probably not going to return to the highs that it was during the height of globalization. Donald Trump, when he came in 2016, one of his main points is he's basically for deglobalization. He's not a globalization supporter, and that was, I think, the beginning of the end for a globalization, for the U.S. dollar, and everything that goes with it. So I guess the answer to the question would be no.
Interesting answer there. So things will go back to more globalization will revert to regionalization or maybe even localization.
Yeah, regionalization, localization, mercantilism, right? So countries won't be globalized to the extent, because we were in an era, remember, where people and corporations could be taxed in one country, they could live in a different country, they could have a globalized life and effectively not pay taxes and have the best of everything. But that has come apart now, and so I think that we're going to go away from that model, and it's also facilitated by something like Bitcoin that is unconfiscatable, it's immutable, it's censorship resistant. You can't block a transaction. Nobody has the ability to kill a transaction. And so it's easier for a local economy to sustain itself. The reason you have national economies and a globalized economy is because the global financial system would support things like the SWIFT money transfer system and things like that. But since the US started to weaponize SWIFT and started to weaponize these money transfer protocols, countries are dropping out of these systems and dropping out of the US dollar and embracing deglobalization. And so what you're left with are these regional and local economic zones that will have at their base the hardest money ever, and that would be Bitcoin. And so they don't need a government to facilitate the creation of the money. They don't need the government to protect against counterfeiting. They don't need the government to support that fiat money in any way. There's that role of government is no longer needed. So why would you support a national government at all? Really, I mean, you would support your local government because you need some police, you need some garbage collection, you need some other stuff that municipal governments are good at. But there's no reason you would support a national government because their biggest role in terms of money creation, transportation, facilitation is no longer needed. So they've been obsolesced essentially.
Okay, last question. If President Nixon had not closed that gold window back in 71, as you mentioned earlier, and the dollar was still backed by gold, how different do you think the world might be today?
Well, the U.S. essentially, when Nixon closed the gold window, defaulted on its obligations. In that case, to Great Britain. So if they didn't close the window, then the U.S. would have had to default, and the dollar would have crashed, and the U.S. would have been fallen into a deep, deep depression, and might not have really survived as a superpower as such. So, which may, you can argue might have been a good thing, because by closing the gold window and by allowing the U.S. to default on its sovereign obligations, it also opened the door to financialization and the rise of the super banks that were able to create trillions and trillions of dollars that gave us the crash of 87, gave us the subprime crisis of 2008, and the current global financial crisis of 2020. That's all caused by banks who have no checks and balances at all. There's no need for them to adhere to any laws or regulatory framework. There's no regulators who are enforcing any laws. The business model at JP Morgan seems to be, it's okay if you catch us stealing money as long as we can keep 75 cents of every dollar we steal. I mean, that's the model. That's their model. And they make billions of dollars with that model. And I just don't understand why if Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan can publicly endorse their model of being able to keep 75 cents of every dollar they steal, why then when somebody is caught robbing a liquor store and stealing $100, how come the same standard of justice is not applied, that they can keep $75 of every $100 they steal and just have to give back $25? I don't know why is there a difference here? Why does Jamie Dimon live in a world where the standard of justice is completely different, right? So that's all fiat money printing that allows him to do it, because he can go to Washington, D.C., and he brings a big bag of money and he bribes people. It's called corruption. And the corruption means that if you're not Jamie Dimon, you go to jail. It's like a monopoly board where Jamie Dimon is constantly passing go and collecting $200, and everyone else is constantly going to jail. Well, that's not a very fun game, is it?
Not at all. Max Keiser, before we wrap up, can you let our viewers know more about your work with the Keiser Report and outside of the Keiser Report?
Right. So we've got the Orange Pill podcast now. It's a new one that comes out every Sunday, and you can join our Telegram group, which goes to t.me/orange pill. It's available in English and Spanish. You can watch Keiser Report, of course. It's easiest to probably watch it on YouTube. We've got over 1,600 episodes now. You can watch every single episode and never have to leave your house ever again. That's one of the benefits. And on Twitter, I'm Max Keiser and Stacy Herbert. Those are the two Twitter handles to follow us. That's pretty much it.
All right. Max Keiser, we thank you for the time you've given us, and I hope you do take the time to get yourself better.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, and continue doing the great work that you're doing.
Thanks, Max. Appreciate it, and hope we can do this again sometime. That was Max Keiser of the Keiser Report. For more of his insights on precious metals and the global economy and Bitcoin, please visit his website, rt.com/shows/Keiser Report. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the SBTV channel to be updated on new content. And do also check out the SBTV podcast on iTunes and Spotify.